worked as a nurse, and cared for my father, while my brother spent his days playing games. He and his girlfriend later tried to take over my room, with my parents supporting their actions. I'm a 28-year-old woman who has been living with my parents, both 60, and my younger brother Jake, 25, for the past 3 years. This wasn't where I imagined I'd be at this stage in my life, but here we are. To give you the full picture, let me start from the beginning. 3 years ago, I was living in a nice apartment in the city, working as a nurse at a busy hospital, and in what I thought was a happy relationship with my boyfriend of 5 years, Mark. We had talked about marriage and maybe starting a family, but one day, I came home early from a shift and found Mark in bed with his coworker. My world shattered instantly. I broke up with Mark on the spot, but I was a wreck. I couldn't stand being in that apartment anymore. Everything reminded me of him and our life together. At the same time, my dad was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. Although it wasn't severe yet, my mom was struggling to manage everything on her own. I decided to move back home to save money, help care for my dad, and take some time to heal from the breakup. My parents were thrilled to have me back, and initially, it was comforting to be surrounded by family during such a tough time. Jake had moved back home about 6 months before I did, right after college. He was always seen as the golden child, smart, charming, and clearly our parents' favorite. I love my brother, but the difference in how we were treated was always noticeable. Growing up, Jake could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. If he got a B on a test, they praised his effort. If I got an A, they wondered why it wasn't an A+. When Jake chose to major in philosophy, they called him intellectual and deep. When I chose to become a nurse, they asked if I wouldn't rather be a doctor instead. So when Jake moved back home without a job lined up, our parents didn't bat an eye. They said he needed time to find himself and explore his options. Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour shifts at the hospital, coming home to help care for Dad, and still contributing to household expenses. For the first year or so, things were manageable. Jake said he was working on his novel and applying for jobs in publishing. Though I was skeptical because I never actually saw him writing or filling out applications, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, I was dealing with my own issues, trying to heal from my breakup, and adjusting to living at home again as an adult. As time went on, Jake's job search seemed to mostly involve playing video games and hanging out with friends. He'd sleep until noon and then spend hours online or out with his buddies. When Mom would gently suggest he look for work, he'd get defensive, claiming she was stifling his creativity. I tried to talk to Jake about it and even offered to help with his resume or practice interview skills, but he'd always brush me off, saying I didn't understand the creative process or was just jealous because he had the freedom to pursue his passions. Meanwhile, I was working hard at the hospital, and especially during COVID. There were days when I came home physically and emotionally drained, only to find Jake lounging on the couch, playing games, and eating the food I'd bought. I tried to discuss the situation with my parents, but they always made excuses for Jake. He's just finding his way, my mom would say. Or, not everyone's path is as straightforward as yours, honey. It was frustrating to say the least. Then last week, Jake dropped a bombshell. At dinner, he announced that his girlfriend, Megan, 23, would be moving in with us. This was the first I'd heard of Megan. Jake had mentioned he was seeing someone, but I didn't know it was serious enough for her to move in. My parents were thrilled and started talking about how nice it would be to have young love in the house again, completely ignoring the fact that we barely had enough space for the 4 of us. That's when Jake revealed the real bombshell. Since Megan was moving in, Jake said they needed a room for privacy, and since I had the second largest bedroom in the house, it made sense for me to move to the basement so they could have my room. I was stunned and looked at my parents, expecting them to shut this down immediately, but they were nodding in agreement, as if this made perfect sense. That's when I lost it. Are you kidding me? You want me to give up my room for your girlfriend? You don't even have a job. Jake rolled his eyes. Come on, sis. Don't be so selfish. Megan and I need our privacy. It's not like you're using the room for anything important. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not using it for anything important? I use it to sleep after 12-hour shifts, where I'm literally saving lives. What do you do all day? Play video games and mooch off Mom and Dad? Jake's face turned red. You don't understand. I'm working on my novel. That takes time and mental energy. Just because I'm not punching a clock doesn't mean I'm not working. Have you written a single word of this so-called novel? I shot back. Because all I've seen you do for the past 3 years is play games and hang out with friends. Please, children, my mom interjected. There's no need to fight. I'm sure we can work something out that makes everyone happy. But I was too angry to back down. No, Mom, this isn't fair. I work full-time, contribute to this household, and help take care of Dad. And now you want me to give up my room for Jake and his girlfriend when he hasn't lifted a finger to help or contribute? That's not fair, my dad spoke up for the first time. Jake contributes in his own way. How? I demanded. Tell me one thing he's done to help this family in the past 3 years. There was an uncomfortable silence until Jake broke it. You're just jealous because you're single and bitter. Maybe if you weren't such a workaholic, you'd have a relationship too. That stung more than I wanted to admit. At least I can support myself, I snapped. I'm not mooching off my parents at 25. Enough, my mom shouted. Both of you go to your rooms. We'll discuss this when everyone has calmed down. As I stormed up to my room, I overheard my mom comforting Jake and telling him not to take my words to heart. It made me feel like I was 15 again, always the bad guy, always the one causing problems. That was a week ago, and since then, the atmosphere in the house has been unbearable. Jake is giving me the silent treatment, which would be fine if he didn't make a point of sighing loudly and looking put upon whenever I enter a room. My parents keep trying to mediate, which really means they keep hinting that I should be more accommodating to Jake's needs. Yesterday, my mom even said, "You know, the basement isn't so bad. We could fix it up for you and make it cozy." I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own home to make room for my freeloading brother and his girlfriend, but at the same time, I feel guilty. Am I being selfish? Should I just suck it up and move to the basement? I don't want to leave because of my dad. His Parkinson's isn't severe yet, but he does need help sometimes, and I worry about him. So Reddit, I need your honest opinion. Am I in the wrong for refusing to give up my room? Asterisk, asterisk. Update. Asterisk, asterisk. First, thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. Your support and advice mean more than you know. I've been trying to take some of your suggestions, but unfortunately, things have only gotten worse. Megan moved in last weekend, and my parents welcomed her with open arms, cooking a big dinner and breaking out the good china. Meanwhile, I was coming off a night shift and just wanted to sleep, but my mom insisted I join them to make Megan feel welcome. Dinner was uncomfortable, to say the least. Jake and Megan were all over each other, giggling and feeding each other bites of food, while my mom gushed about how wonderful it was to have young love in the house again, and my dad nodded along enthusiastically. I tried to be polite, asking Megan about her job and interests. It turns out she's between jobs right now, having recently quit her position as a barista to focus on her Instagram influencer career. I had to bite my tongue to keep from asking how exactly she planned to pay for things. Upon returning home from work the following day, I discovered that Jake and Megan had completely taken over the living room. They were lounging on the couch, engrossed in a television show while consuming snacks. The coffee table was littered with empty chip bags and soda cans. When I inquired if they could tidy up a bit, Jake merely rolled his eyes and replied, "Relax, sis. We'll handle it later." However, they did not. The atmosphere in the house has become increasingly unbearable. Jake and Megan deliberately act loud and affectionate in my presence, seemingly to make me uncomfortable. They often engage in public displays of affection on the couch, while I attempt to watch television or laugh boisterously outside my door when I am trying to sleep between shifts. I attempted to discuss the situation with my parents again, but it felt as though I was speaking to a brick wall. When I highlighted that I work full-time and contribute financially, while Jake and Megan do nothing, my mother responded, "Well, you've always been more independent than Jake. He just needs more time to figure things out. And Megan is pursuing her dreams as an influencer. That's a legitimate career these days, you know." I was taken aback by her words. I replied, "Mom, Jake has had 3 years to sort himself out, and Megan has only 127 Instagram followers. That is not a career, it is a hobby." My mother's expression hardened as she retorted, "I think you're just jealous. Jake and Megan are young and in love. They have their entire lives ahead of them. Perhaps if you weren't so focused on work all the time, you would have found someone too." I was too shocked to respond. Is this truly how they perceive me? As a bitter workaholic? I am seriously contemplating moving out, even though it would complicate my ability to care for my father. I feel as though I am being pushed out of my own family. The house I once called home no longer feels welcoming. Yet, I'm conflicted. If I leave, who will assist Dad on his difficult days? Who will ensure he takes his medication on time? My mother tries, but she is not always reliable in keeping track of things. Additionally, what if Jake and Megan decide to host parties or engage in irresponsible behavior? I feel trapped between a rock and a hard place. If I stay, I'm miserable, but if I leave, I fear for my father's well-being. I don't know what to do. Update. Things have only gotten worse. I've started looking for apartments, but I'm torn about leaving my dad. Every time I think about moving out, I remember last month when Dad had a bad day and fell in the shower. I was the one who heard his call for help, got him up, and made sure he was okay. What if something like that happens and I'm not there? Meanwhile, Jake has intensified his efforts to get my room. He's now telling our parents that Megan is claustrophobic and needs more space, which I know is a lie. Megan has never mentioned this before, and I've seen her comfortably fit into tiny booths at restaurants and small dressing rooms at stores. But of course, my parents believe him. They've started hinting about how nice the basement could be with some improvements. My mom even left home decor magazines on my bed, opened to pages about cozy basement renovations. I've tried to stand my ground, but it's getting harder. The other day, I overheard my mom talking to my aunt on the phone, expressing concern about me, saying I seemed angry all the time and unable to be happy for Jake. It hurt to hear her talk about me, like I'm the problem. The final straw came yesterday. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital, where we lost a young patient, not much older than me. I was emotionally and physically exhausted, dreaming of a hot shower and my bed. But when I got home and went up to my room, I found Jake and Megan had moved some of their stuff in. There were boxes on my bed and clothes hanging in my closet. For a moment, I thought I had walked into the wrong room. When I confronted them, Jake had the audacity to say, "We thought you'd be okay with sharing until you move out. You're hardly ever here with all your shifts." I lost it. I yelled at both of them to get out and take their stuff with them. Megan started crying, saying I was being mean and unfair, while Jake put his arm around her. I glared at me as if I were the villain. My mom came over to see what the commotion was and ended up lecturing me about being more considerate of Jake and Megan's needs. "They're a young couple," she said. "They need their space. Why can't you understand that?" "What about my space?" I shot back. "What about my needs? I work 12-hour shifts saving lives, and I can't even count on having a place to sleep when I come home." My mom sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Honey, I think you need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Family is about compromise. Jake and Megan are starting their lives together. Don't you want to support your brother?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about supporting me?" I asked. "I'm your daughter too, Mom. Or have you forgotten that?" The look on her face was a mix of hurt and disappointment. "Of course I haven't forgotten," she said quietly. "But you're stronger than Jake. You've always been able to handle things on your own. Jake needs more support." I didn't know how to respond to that. How do you respond when your own mother essentially tells you that you matter less because you're more capable? I'm at my wit's end. I love my family, but I feel like I'm drowning. The unfairness of it all is eating away at me. I find myself feeling angry all the time, snapping at small things. This isn't who I want to be. I think I need to move out for my own sanity, but the guilt is overwhelming. Am I abandoning my family? Am I being selfish for wanting to put myself first for once? I don't know what to do. I feel lost and alone, even in a house full of people. How did things get so messed up? Update. I've done it. I've finally moved out. After Jake and Megan moved their stuff into my room, I realized I couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. It was damaging my mental health and starting to affect my work. I couldn't risk making mistakes at the hospital because I was distracted by the drama at home. Finding an apartment wasn't easy. I wanted to stay close to my parents' house. I wanted to stay close enough to visit my dad regularly, but rentals in the area are expensive. I eventually found a small one-bedroom apartment about a 15-minute drive away. It's not much, but it's mine, and for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Telling my parents I was moving out was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My mom cried and asked why I was abandoning the family. My dad looked hurt and confused. Jake, on the other hand, couldn't hide his glee and immediately started discussing how he and Megan would redecorate my old room. The day I moved out was surreal. As I packed, I realized how much stuff I'd accumulated over the years. I found old family photos, Jake and me as kids, all of us smiling on vacation. It made me sad to think about how much has changed. My parents helped me move, but there was a palpable tension. My mom kept suggesting I could always come back if things didn't work out, while Jake and Megan conveniently had plans and couldn't help. I've been in my new place for 2 weeks now, and am still processing everything that happened. Part of me feels guilty for leaving, especially because of my dad. I call him every day to check in and visit on weekends to help out, but it's not the same as being there all the time. Another part of me feels relieved. I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying until I was no longer in that environment. My apartment might be small, but it's peaceful. I can come home after a long shift and relax without worrying about drama. Yesterday, I got a call from my dad. He sounded tired and mentioned he misses having me around. He also said that Jake and Megan have been arguing a lot, and it's causing him stress. Apparently, Megan's influencer career isn't taking off as quickly as she hoped, and she's been pressuring Jake to get a job. Jake, of course, is resistant, insisting he needs to focus on his novel. I feel bad for my dad. He's caught in the middle of all this, and the stress can't be good for his health. I offered to help in any way I can, but I'm still figuring out how best to support him from a distance. I offered to come over more often to help out, but Dad said he didn't want to burden me. It broke my heart a little to hear him say that. After talking to him, I called my mom to check in. She was polite but distant, asking about my new place and job, but I could tell her heart wasn't in it. Towards the end of the call, she sighed and said, "I just don't understand why you couldn't work things out with Jake and Megan. Family should stick together." I tried to explain again how the situation had become untenable for me, but she didn't seem to hear me. She just kept saying she hoped I'd come to my senses and move back home. It's frustrating, because I feel like I'm still being cast as the villain. My parents seem to think I moved out on a whim or out of spite towards Jake, rather than as a last resort after months of feeling disrespected and unappreciated in my own home. The guilt still gnaws at me every time I return to my quiet apartment. I wonder if I should have tried harder to make things work, but then I remember how it felt living there, the constant tension, feeling pushed aside, and the lack of respect for my space and needs. I know I made the right choice for my mental health. I'm working on establishing a new routine now. I still visit my parents every weekend to help out and spend time with Dad. I've been teaching him how to use video chat so we can stay in touch more frequently during the week. It's not the same as being there, but it's something. Jake and I haven't spoken since I moved out. Part of me misses the little brother he used to be before all this drama, but another part of me is still angry at how he treated me and showed no appreciation for everything I did for the family. Megan reached out to me on social media the other day, apologizing for how things turned out and hoping we could be friends. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure if I'm ready to engage with her. I'm unsure if Megan's apology is genuine or if she's just realizing that living with my parents isn't as carefree as she imagined. As for me, I'm focusing on my work and building a life outside of the family drama. I've started volunteering at a local animal shelter on my days off, which has been rewarding. I'm also considering taking classes to advance my nursing career. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have the mental space to think about my own future. But there are still nights when I lie awake wondering if I did the right thing. Was I wrong for refusing to give up my room and ultimately moving out? Should I have tried harder to make things work? Am I being selfish for putting my own needs first? I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering if there was another way I could have made my parents understand how I felt. Yet, every time I think about moving back, I remember how it felt to live there and know I can't return to that situation. So here I am, trying to navigate this new chapter of my life. I'm hopeful that, with time, my relationship with my family will improve. Maybe Jake will mature and start contributing, or my parents will recognize that they've been enabling his behavior. Or perhaps things will stay the same, and I'll need to find a way to accept that. Either way, I'm committed to taking care of myself and my dad as best I can. I'm working on forgiving myself for leaving and believing that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being. Reddit, after hearing the whole story and how things have played out, what do you think? Was I wrong in this situation? Did I make the right choice by moving out? Or should I have found a way to make it work at home? I'm still struggling with these questions and would really appreciate some outside perspective.